Hi, welcome to NASA's Kitchen. We are here today inside the NASA's Space Food Laboratory here at NASA's Johnson Space Center. While everyone here is getting ready for this Thanksgiving holiday, complete with the perfect turkey and all the trimmings, we are here today talking to Vicki Clares, our NASA food scientist, who's going to talk a little about how the crew aboard the International Space Station. We have 3 who are living in space now, including NASA astronaut Kevin Ford, who are going to be celebrating their Thanksgiving. They're aboard the International Space Station, flying about 230 miles above Earth. Vicki, thank you for being here to come talk to us about how they're going to celebrate their Thanksgiving and the food system there aboard the space station.
Well, you're welcome, and I'd like to start by wishing everybody a happy Thanksgiving. We have several options in our food system for the crew members to choose from so they can kind of select what they want to have for their Thanksgiving meal. But we do have some of the traditional items available. So we have smoked turkey. We also have a dressing, a cornbread dressing that's rehydratable. They can add hot water to that. We have green beans and mushrooms. We have broccoli au gratin. We have mashed potatoes. We have bread products, and for dessert we have cobblers. So we have a cherry blueberry cobbler, apricot cobbler that they can choose from. So we have many of the traditional, we also have yams. We have many of the traditional items that we think of as being a traditional Thanksgiving. So they can choose from all of that to make up their Thanksgiving meal or their Christmas meal coming up next month as well.
So for a number of items for the crew to actually choose from. And from what I understand, Sunny, just before she left, had left some fluffy marshmallows or marshmallow fluff for Kevin, so he can add to his yams. So perhaps he'll be whipping up some candied yams this Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
So first, before we even get into more talking about the space food, I would like to talk to you a little about your role here as the NASA food scientist. In fact, we had polled Twitter and asked some questions and had them send us some questions. And one of those questions there are from Joshua Stern: what does it take to become a NASA food scientist?
Well, food science is, food scientists typically work in the industry and do product development and quality assurance for food companies. I started here with one of the contractors who was working on the shuttle food system, actually. I started quite a few years ago, 1985, and so I worked here for several years for a contractor before becoming a civil servant. And I actually started as civil servant manager of the shuttle food system, and eventually transitioned over to managing the space station food system. So we actually have several food scientists here. On the NASA side, we currently have 3 food scientists. Myself, and then we have one food scientist who's working on what we call our Advanced Food Technology program. So that's our research arm, if you will, of our future food systems. And then we have a new food scientist who came on board recently, and she's working the Orion and the exploration class food systems, the operational systems of the future, because myself and the AFT food scientist, Michelle Perchanik, we're not ready to retire yet, but we're getting closer. And so Grace is going to be our food scientist of the future after Michelle and I are gone.
Okay, great. So I want to talk to you a little about talk to me about the ISS food system. What exactly is that? What does it entail?
Okay. Well, we have to start with, people have to understand that we have an all-shelf stable food system, meaning we have no dedicated freezers or refrigerators for food. So that requires all of our food processing to last. Our food has to last a long time at room temperature. That's what they call shelf stable. So it has to be stable on the shelf for a very long time. The only refrigeration we have on orbit, they do have a small chiller where they can actually chill a beverage. So the water that we have on station, they either have hot water or ambient water, room temperature water. So when they prepare a beverage, if they want it to be chilled, they're going to have to put it in this chiller and let it chill for a while. It's small, it's about the internal volume of a typical home microwave, so not very large, but it does allow them to have a chilled beverage after they exercise. And for about the first 10 years on space station, they didn't even have that option. The chiller was added when we went to crew of 6 on space station, and we added a second food preparation area. So the chiller's only been there a relatively short while compared to the life of the International Space Station. But they really appreciate having a chilled beverage when they have to exercise a lot every day, and they get hot and sweaty, and so they like the idea of having a chiller now.
Sure. And I understand, you know, food, while it's important, you know, to our bodies to sustain our lives, but it's also, there's a psychological aspect to it. And can you talk to me a little about that?
Yeah, when I first came to work here and all we were flying was short shuttle flights, food really was low on the totem pole as far as priority, because, you know, most crew members that flew on shuttle felt like, well, it's a camping trip, you know, no big deal, I can find something to eat. So very few of them were, you know, very concerned with what was on the menu or available to them to eat. But as we went into the Phase 1 program and our crew members went and began to stay on Mir for extended period of time, they began to realize that food, the longer you're there, the more important it becomes, because it's one of the few creature comforts that you do have on orbit. And so those first crew members who transitioned to long duration space flight, they quickly spread the word among the rest of the astronauts that food becomes more and more important the longer you're staying on orbit. And so for our International Space Station crew members who are now staying typically about 6 months at a time on orbit, the psychological aspect of the food is extremely important. And so they pay a lot of attention. Our basic menu on space station is a standard menu, and it includes all of the foods and beverages that we have, and we have about 200 different foods and beverages on the U.S. side, so it's a pretty big selection. But we do allow our crew members to augment that standard menu with 9 what we call bonus containers, and those are of their own choice. They can choose more, you know, they can choose their favorites from our food system, or they can also choose commercial off-the-shelf products that meet our shelf life requirements and our microbiological requirements. And so the crew members focus a great deal of time on what to put in those bonus containers, because that is their
kind of their snack pack in their pantry. So.
Yeah, and it's a big part of their psychological aspect of the food, because that's what they get to choose, and that's going to be the little special things that they have. Sometimes it can be dessert type items, but often it's commercial entrees that they want, like maybe a thermostabilized Indian food or something, you know, of that nature. So ethnic foods are often part of what they choose for their bonus containers. We have a lot of anecdotal evidence from crew members that some foods, not all foods, but some foods taste different to them when they get on orbit than they did on the ground. And it works both ways. We'll have crew members select something thinking they're really going to like it when they get on orbit, and then they don't. Or we'll have crew members come back and say, I didn't like this on the ground, but boy, when I got on orbit, I tasted it and I was really sorry I hadn't taken more. Yeah. And so, and we really feel like that a lot of that has to do with the change in the aroma that they're getting from the food. So most of the way that you and I perceive the taste of a food, a big part of that is the smell, the aroma that you get from the food.